Um, so, welcome, Dr. Popper, to Raw and Cooked Vegan.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay. And if you could, just tell us a little bit about your family's orientation to diet and fitness when you were young.
Well, it wasn't orientation. I had a fairly physically active dad, but my mother didn't exercise, and our diet was, it wasn't awful. I mean, people didn't eat out all the time like they do now. So there were parts of it that were better than today. But I ate a lot of cheese and dairy products and cookies and sugar and never really understood the importance of diet or practiced healthy habits at all. So I probably was saved by the time, by the generation that I grew up in, that things weren't worse than they were, but it was anything but a healthy diet.
Okay, okay. And do I understand this right? In your 20s, you came across the book by Dr. McDougall?
It was actually when I was about 38 years old. And
Oh.
by that point in time, I'm really lucky because I was over fat. I mean, I just had a lot of body fat and, and tired all the time. And I had dark circles under my eyes and, but I wasn't sick. And a lot of times the way that people find out about this is they become seriously ill and then they start looking around for alternatives. So I was very fortunate that didn't happen. I was just sick or just tired and a little over fat at the time that I found out about it.
Okay. And prior to that, you had no real interest in diet or health in any way?
Oh, absolutely not. My habits degenerated as an adult. I lived on about 3 pots of coffee a day and a pound of shortbread cookies. I absolutely refused to engage in any form of exercise. I tell people I used to put my garbage cans on the hood of the car and drive them to the street because it was a way that I could avoid physical activity. So no interest in it, didn't care about it, didn't think about it, just going on my merry way and absolutely no interest at all.
All right. So you read this book and it kind of opened your eyes a little bit. And was it, I know that after reading the book, you undertook some training. Was it during the course of this training that you changed your diet? Did you change your diet first, personally, individually? Did it all kind of happen at the same time?
Well, I changed my diet first, and I also started reading some other things. I found out about John Robbins and For New America, and so I was reading some other things at the same time, and that is very important because by the time I started getting some formal training, if you want to call it that, I realized that most of what I was being trained about was wrong because I had had an opportunity to do some reading and change my diet, the whole 9 yards. So I started on my own to change my diet, also did some more reading, and then thought, gosh, this is what I want to do, so I think I'll pursue some education.
That's fantastic. And can you say a little bit about some of the benefits that you saw as you gradually began changing your diet? Like the weight came off, I assume, and what were some of the other things you noticed?
Well, my skin cleared up, the weight came off. I mean, I lost probably 30 pounds of body fat and got real lean and a lot of energy. I mean, I was one of those people that couldn't put sentences together before my first 4 cups of coffee in the morning. So I woke up feeling energetic. I started becoming athletic. I ran marathons. It was just it was like at the age of 38, I looked older then than I do now when I'm 57. So it was just, I just couldn't believe it. It's like rediscovering life all over again when this happened. And that was part of why I was so excited about the whole thing is I could see the difference in me. And I also started to see the difference in people around me who I was starting to influence to change their habits too.
Okay, that's great. And that's a huge topic I want to revisit. But can you tell us, after you experienced these changes personally, what was some of the training you underwent? Was it a naturopathic degree?
Well, the first thing was I pursued some training in nutrition. And one of the things that, and this actually, we're doing something about this problem today at the Wellness Forum, but I was so discouraged by the educational options that were available at that time.
Yep.
And they were divided into 2 camps. You could pursue traditional dietetics. And I was appalled. I mean, that was my first choice. I thought I would go to Ohio State University, enroll as a dietetics student. I looked at the curriculum and what it was all about, and I knew too much by that point in time. I knew I could not buy into this whole thing. And this internship that dietitians love to talk about, 900 hours is spent making meatloaf and jello in cafeterias in nursing homes and hospitals. I thought, at this point in time in my life, that's just not going to be what I do. So unfortunately, the other end of it is this more holistic nutrition training, and it's better because it doesn't focus on food service and some of the other stuff that I just have no interest in. But it was still the wrong approach. In other words, if one camp is teaching the food pyramid from the USDA and the other one's teaching how to use supplementation to cure symptoms, you're not any better off. So I picked the lesser of evils, went for something that was a little more clinically oriented, and then I went to naturopathy school, which that was lacking. I mean, I knew I didn't want to go to medical school. I wasn't going to prescribe drugs and do surgery.
Right.
Naturopathy school, not a whole lot better. They're training people to be the holistic pharmacists, in my opinion. So the bottom line is I picked the better of all bad options for all of my educational choices and said one day I'm going to do something about it. And that's why we started our own school, the Wellness Farm Institute, because I would like to have good choices available to people who are in my situation now.
Well, it's great. There's so many points you're bringing up here. One of the quotes I saw on your site is that you really want to get away from this just selling products, and I love that. You're really primarily interested in people's health, and we'll talk some more.
It's about education.
Say again. I'm sorry.
It's about education. Products are tools. In other words, we make some fabulous healthy foods here. But when people call in and they want to buy our foods, I tell them, why do you want to buy our food? And they'll say, because I want to be healthy. Well, then you need to sign up and take our classes, because eating a few of our dishes every week, that's not going to improve your health. You have to change your whole dietary pattern. You've got to learn the scientific underpinning of this so that you can make good choices about what to eat all of the time. And so it really is about the education and teaching people what a healthy diet is, what the importance of their health, what the science shows about the connection between diet and health. And then we also get into a lot of other things even beyond the diet, telling people or helping people to understand how to interact with the medical community so that they don't get hurt by that, because that can hurt you as much as eating a poor diet can. So lots to learn about this, and we really want people to be educated consumers.
That's beautiful, beautiful. Perhaps you could say a little bit about, I'm sure you've thought about this. I mean, you reached the age, you were in your mid-30s before this kind of dawned on you, and I think you were kind of shocked when you read Dr. McDougall's book. Why is this information not more widely known? So what can you say about that?
Well, you start to sound a little bit like a conspiracy theorist when you tell people about this, but the first thing is it's not taught in school, and it's not taught in naturopathy school either. I call myself a recovering naturopath because I don't practice what I learned in school. So it's not taught in school. We have government policies that favor the promotion of meat and dairy products. And the United States Department of Agriculture should not be in the business of advising Americans about diet, because they are in the business of advocating for farmers. And I'm not against that. I just don't think they should be doing both things. And then all these health professionals groups like the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics and the American Medical Association, they take money from manufacturers, drug companies, food companies. Then we have the disease groups. The American Diabetes Association's health tip of the day on their website was sponsored by Eskimo Pie for about 18 months. I mean, think about it. And I know that it's just impossible for these groups to give out the right information about diet with those types of conflicts of interest. So if I had to come up with like one thing, the all-encompassing thing, it's that there's too much financial conflict of interest interfering in what goes on, and it starts with health professionals in medical school, and it carries through to federal policy.
Wow. Okay. Another side to this is kind of cultural orientation and habit from childhood. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, as you made these personal changes for yourself, how did that affect the way you interacted with family, friends, and society in a broader way? What did you find resistance?
It's easier now than it was back then, because back then when I did it, because we're talking about almost 20 years ago, the restaurants didn't serve healthy food. I mean, you really were the outlier. So today it's a lot easier, but there's a certain process I think everybody goes through. And I warn people about this when they start down the path. When you change your diet and do the things that I'm telling people to do, the first thing that happens is everybody around you thinks it's some silly phase that you're going through. And so they're not particularly supportive. And there are a couple of things going on. First is they're pretty sure you're going to get over it and quit this. And so why go to a lot of bother to accommodate you if you're not going to be doing this by February, right? And then
Right.
the second thing is that it forces them to take a look at what they're doing, and that can be a little bit uncomfortable. So you get some resistance, and oh, come on, it won't hurt you to have just this, and what do you mean you're not going to eat this that I made for you? And I went through that too, and I think people still do get a little bit of that. Once people figure out that this isn't a phase, this is like the way you live your life, they become incredibly accommodating. And so I have lots of friends that are not eating the way that I eat. And people wonder, well, how can that be? Well, I can't make people do this. They got to be willing. And
Yep.
every year I pick up a few converts from people who I know that decide to do this. But the vast majority of the people I interact do not eat the way that I do. However, they are very careful to make sure that I'm taken care of. So, for example, my book club, I'm the only vegan in my book club. And whoever chooses the book chooses the restaurant. But whoever does that is always very sure to ask, now we have a vegan in the group, are you going to be able to make something for her? And, they'll send me an email saying, I checked and the chef said he's got something in mind for you, blah, blah, blah. So once you get past that initial stage and people know it's what you're going to do, they become very supportive and very accommodating. And, it's no different than if you had a food allergy, really. People would take care of you then too.
Absolutely. Okay. Um, One thing I'm curious about, can you characterize briefly the makeup of your diet? Like, I'm sure you're probably familiar with the term 80-10-10. Would you say
Yes.
that a majority of your caloric intake is carbohydrate, and then you have a relatively, let's say, relative compared to the standard American perception, a relatively low intake of fat and protein?
Yeah, I would say my diet's probably between 10 and 15% fat. It's about 10% protein, the rest carbohydrates. Carbohydrate heavy diet. However, 80-10-10 really refers to more of a raw food orientation, and that's not the way that I eat. I eat lots of rice and potatoes and things of that nature, but definitely carbohydrate heavy. And carbohydrate is the energy currency of the body, so it is really important for people to eat a very high carbohydrate diet if you want to be an energizer bunny and do all the things you want to do every day.
Absolutely. And would you say, even though you're saying that you do eat cooked carbohydrates, you also eat fresh fruits and vegetables too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Great big
Yeah.
salads. And one of the fun things once you get into eating this way is how good some foods taste and how good they taste, particularly in season. You become real conscious of that. So I eat a lot of peaches in July and I eat a lot of berries in, May and June, and a lot of asparagus earlier in the year. So you really get conscious of when food is its very best. And that's when it's great when it's consumed raw.
All right. And is organic produce important to you?
Well, it is to me, but it's not important for health. All right. In other words, I'm in a position where I can pay attention a little bit more, and so I like to support local farmers. I like to buy organic food. However, even some of the very activist groups that are trying to reform farming will say on their websites, you're better eating the produce with some herbicides and pesticides than not eating the produce. And so I always want to be clear, because for some people, this is an economic issue. They cannot afford to eat
Right.
organic produce, or they live in an area of the country where it's not readily available. In a lot of small towns in Ohio, it's kind of hard to find organic lettuce at certain times of the year in particular. So the most important thing is that you eat these foods, and then if financially and logistically you can move a little more towards organic, that's great.
Okay, great. Um, I wonder if you could tell me, one of the things I love about you is you're kind of saying that this emphasis on supplementation is misguided. Uh, and you could definitely tell us your thoughts on that. But while you do that, could you say if there are one or two that you think are important for vegans to pay attention to, i.e. B12, vitamin D, or perhaps iodine?
Yeah, and let's cover that. Well, let me make an overarching statement. First of all, supplements should be treated like drugs. They have some usefulness in terms of treatment. But really, to think that there are tens of thousands of nutrients in food, and you can take 17 of them and put them in a pill, and somehow duplicate the effects of those nutrients on health as compared to eating them in the foods with all of the other nutrients. And I always use this example, which helps people understand, okay? If we bought tickets to go to the symphony tonight, we show up at the theater and we paid $50 for those tickets, and the curtains open and there's a lone clarinet player sitting on the stage. And we said, where's the symphony? And the promoter says, well, the clarinet player is going to play exactly the same thing that she would be playing if the whole symphony was here. Okay, but see, we bought tickets to the symphony, and it's not the same thing as if the whole symphony was here, and I want my money back, all right? So everybody understands that. Well, that's the same thing when you take vitamin C in a pill instead of eating it in a kiwi fruit, for example, because in the kiwi fruit, this vitamin C is paired with all kinds of other nutrients and cofactors and enzymes, and it's just not the same thing. So you want to eat the food. For a long time, I think the prevailing thought about supplements, well, you could at least use them for insurance. You know, they wouldn't do any harm. Maybe you get some benefit. But we have a lot of studies showing now that not only do these things not help, but that some of these supplements have side effects that are significantly negative. And vitamin D and iodine are amongst them, believe me. We just spent a lot of time in this office getting people off these vitamin D supplements, and the iodine in this office is locked up. It's actually under lock and key because we're that concerned about people getting a hold of it who shouldn't be messing around with it. So B12 is the exception to the rule. First of all, there's no evidence that you can hurt yourself by taking it like you can some of this other stuff. The other thing is if you eat a really strictly vegan diet, you don't eat any fortified foods, probably a good idea to take it, because how people like me and you used to get our B12 was from drinking water, groundwater, and
Yes.
from food that wasn't cleaned so well. But, sanitation, which is a good thing. Nobody wants to go back to the way it was before we got on this sanitation kick. But it's really taken all the B12 out of the normal supply of things that we would be eating. So a B12 supplement is a good idea for many people. And there's no danger in taking it like there is with a lot of this other stuff.
Okay, great. And is the B12 you take, is that a sublingual methylcobalamin?
Well, you can take a sublingual. We have drops here. It's the type is not so important. It's just that you take it. And B12 needs are so small that it really takes a long time to develop a deficiency. And every supplement out there has 1,000 times the daily requirement. So, whatever you're taking is probably just fine.
Gotcha. Okay. One thing I would like you to weigh in on, if you would, is the effects of this diet on ovulation, menstruation, and childbearing, and like studies you've seen and perhaps personal experiences you've had. You always hear that a woman's cycle becomes much easier to bear on this kind of diet. Would you agree? And maybe even that's the wrong way to characterize it. It becomes more natural and it's not an unpleasant experience. Yeah.
Right. Well, hormones are profoundly affected by the foods that we eat. And and having said that, we have a significant percentage of the female population in this country that is dealing with issues related to hormone imbalances. And that ranges from, menstrual cramps, PMS, excessive menstrual cycles, infertility, polycystic ovary syndrome, endometriosis. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. What's really wonderful about this diet is that within a very short period of time, 90 to 120 days, these hormone levels begin to be properly, estrogen levels in particular in women come down a lot. And as a result, their reproductive cycles are easy. I mean, it's a non-event, and even menopause becomes a non-event. Our folks here wake up one day and say, "Gosh, I haven't had a menstrual period in 9 or 10 months. I guess I went through menopause." I didn't even know it was happening, and that's the way it should be. As it pertains to fertility, we have a significant percentage of couples in this country, about 15% at any given point in time, who are trying to conceive and either can't conceive or the female cannot carry the baby to term. And we have documented over 100 cases here at the Wellness Forum of women who were unable to carry the baby to term, who became pregnant and successfully delivered children after change to this diet. So study in an obstetrics journal that said that, I'm paraphrasing here because I don't have it in front of me right now, but it basically, the authors said in conclusion, it appears that there is a fertility dietary pattern. And when women follow this pattern, it is much easier for them to become pregnant than when they don't. And so even the journals reflect this, but what we hear about these issues is not always what's published in the medical journals, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that brings up another thing I want to ask you about, and I think you kind of addressed this in the work that you're doing, is you want to get more science involved. I mean, to me, I've been hearing these, what the medical profession calls anecdotal stories of people overcoming myriad illnesses through nutrition and proper dietary change. I'm tired of this anecdotal label, but I guess you can't get away from it until you have these scientific studies. So maybe you could say a little something about that.
Well, I disagree that all we have is anecdotal evidence. My practice specialty is inflammatory bowel diseases, and while we don't have studies showing that people eating our diet recover, I have hundreds of studies or cases here where that's happened, where you put people on a very specific diet and they can eat their way out of these conditions. However, we do have lots of studies showing the various dietary patterns and how they adversely affect the health of the GI tract, which leads to Crohn's and colitis. So I think that what we have is a refusal to acknowledge, not a lack of information. And do the same thing. Having said that, I would love to see studies done that show what happens with control groups and all that sort of thing. You put 100 people on my diet and you cure Crohn's disease, and 100 people that don't, and they end up having other outcomes. But even without that, there is enough evidence, in my opinion, to support the right.
When I edit this, I'll try and take out any parts that aren't working. But
Okay.
In this vein of studies and science to back up this nutritional approach, can you say a little bit about older studies that were done with vegans? And this is my impression. Tell me if I'm wrong. We don't really know what a lot of those older vegans were eating. They could have been high fat diets. They probably weren't very well. The parameters of what the vegans were eating were probably not that well set, and I think that may skew the results of some of those older studies that included vegans. And I think perhaps now we have vegans who are doing a more low-fat, low-protein diet that's more reliable. Do you think that's accurate?
Actually, there are very few studies on vegan. There are many studies that have looked at people claiming to eat some version of the plant-based diet, and the vast majority of people who are eating a plant-based diet today aren't getting it right. And the problem is definitions. In other words, there are a lot of people who gave up animal foods for ethical reasons, and I have a great deal of respect for that because I share that concern. However, when they don't do it for health reasons, a lot of times they give up the animal foods and they eat junk and oils and, and I've had people in here, it's not as bad as it used to be in some respects, but, they're eating oven baked potato chips and lots of olive oil and veggie shreds for cheese and, all this kind of, and that's not a health promoting diet. So we have a problem defining a health promoting diet. And actually, I'd rather see somebody eat a little bit of animal food and get the rest of it right than a vegan eating 80% junk food, eating not they were when they were eating animal food, and certainly nothing close to veganism. So I think the key is that you have to get this diet right, and one of the and the whole dietary pattern has to be right. And one of the ways that I explain this to people is it's like having a safe in the wall that has $10,000 in it, and there's 4 numbers to the combination to open up the wall safe. All right, so if you get 3 of those numbers right, you do not get $7,500. You have to get the 4th number, and then you get the whole 10,000. Okay, so you have to get eating the right. It's not just eliminating stuff, including stuff. You have to get the oil out of the diet. You got to get the fat out of the diet. I had somebody in here yesterday who was eating a pound of cashews every 3 or 4 days. That person is going to end up with just as many health issues as the person who's eating French fries and a cheeseburger every other day. Yeah. So you really do have to. It does affect the outcomes of studies. To go to your point.
Okay. That's an excellent point. Can you list some of the diseases that you have seen completely disappear by putting folks on this regimen?
Yeah. First of all, type 2 diabetes with a great deal of predictability. Coronary artery disease, great deal of predictability. Weight drops off, blood pressure comes down. Inflammatory bowel diseases, Crohn's, colitis, that's what I do a lot of in this office. A lot of infertility, premenstrual syndrome, arthritis, autoimmune diseases, multiple sclerosis, asthma, allergies, chronic infections, anything chronic and degenerative, migraine headaches, acne, all those things go away. They all get better, and in a lot of situations they go away. The confounding factors are compliance. The more compliant people are, the faster they can eat their way out of these problems. The second thing is how much medical attention they've gotten before they start the diet, because a lot of people are suffering more from the effects of the medications and the procedures they've endured than they are the actual disease. But so the earlier we get them, the better off they are. And the more compliant they are, the better off they are. There are a handful of people, maybe 4 or 5%, who've honestly been dealt a poor genetic hand. And those people have trouble eating their way out of these conditions. But I tell people, you got about a 95% chance of getting better on this diet. My gosh, those are pretty good odds. You got to give it a try.
Yeah, amen, amen. I know since you interact with Dr. McDougall, I think a good bit, can you say a little bit about what anthropology is revealing to us in terms of what prehistoric man might have been eating? A lot of these paleo, primal-oriented diets are advocating these high-fat, high-protein diets. I think it's obvious to you, it's obvious to me that these are not healthy diets. And have you seen any evidence as to what we were really eating back then?
Well, some of the evidence, we just have to look at what primitive man looked like. At the time that they're talking about, man weighed about 60 pounds, lived in the trees, was barely bipedal, had no weaponry, refrigeration skills. Suggest that under those circumstances, killing animals every day and living on them is almost ludicrous when you think about it.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I say is that there's a notorious anthropologist that promotes this diet. And I've had an opportunity to meet him, and he's a lovely person. I think he's misdirected, and I disagree with his book. But I tell him, I'm not an anthropologist, so I'm not going to argue with you on that. All right. What I am going to tell you is this. The first thing is, let's not get caught up in what folks like Dr. Goldhammer call the naturalistic fallacy. Because we used to do it this way, we used to drill on teeth without Novocaine. But you know what? It's a bad idea, and we have better options now. All right. So the fact that we used to do it doesn't mean we should still do it. The second thing is that clearly, if you look around the world, we can see this documented in several different ways. We have population studies that show differences in disease rates in areas of the world where people eat a more plant-centered diet. We have intervention studies showing that when sick people adopt a plant-based diet, they get well. We have migration studies showing that when people leave an area of the world and come to where they eat a plant-based diet, come to the United States, they duplicate our obesity and diet, even if it was good for barely bipedal people living in the trees many centuries ago. It's not a good idea right now. And so we've got to stop promoting it. And we have to start looking at what works. And I think one of the problems we have in culture today, we're talking about medicine or education or anything else, is when we find something that works, we should be showing everybody how to do it. There are people out there that are educating kids that come from underprivileged homes. We should make every teacher who's in that situation study with them. We have doctors in this country who are curing people with degenerative disease. We should mandate that medical students study with them. And we really focus people who are producing results. And unfortunately, that's really not what medicine is all about these days.
God, that's such a beautiful statement, such a beautiful statement. One thing I want to get in before we close, I heard you did this beautiful work where you went out into a poor community and you taught these folks how to eat this way. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Was that in California or was it in Ohio? Where did that take place?
Sacramento, California.
Sacramento? Okay.
We sort of led the charge. Basically, the idea was to do several things. First of all, many of us have had the great fortune of working for large companies who paid us to come in and teach their employees how to eat better and all that sort of thing, and we felt it was a way to give back. I think the second thing is we are all sick and tired of hearing how expensive this diet is, because we know from personal experience that the better you eat, the cheaper it is. I mean, my grocery bill is a fraction of what it used to be, and I eat optimally every single day. So our goal was to show that, A, people who live on limited means are interested in their health, and we showed that that was true because they showed up to the meetings, they changed their diet, they followed directions, they got off their medications, they lost weight. We wanted to show that it could be done within their limited means, and we did that too. These people were the working poor, people who were on public assistance, and they were able to do this with their limited means. And so we showed that the diet is not expensive, that everybody can do this. And in fact, what I'm so excited about if we could do more of this type of work is that, the federal government can't keep spending money ad infinitum. So if we could show people on food stamps, for example, how to eat really well on the assistance that they're currently getting, wouldn't that be great? And if
Yeah.
we could show people who aren't yet getting assistance how to eat well within their means so that they don't need assistance, wouldn't that be great? We would be doing a great favor for the federal budget in addition to changing the health of so many millions of people who really need this help.
Yeah, that's such a powerful thing. I mean, the amount of money wasted, just wasted. Do you find, I mean, you've probably gotten good at this. Do you ever get frustrated at the level of ignorance out in the community and you see relatives or members of society suffering needlessly? Is that frustrating at all?
Well, we all have our days where we get a little tired of this, and then you get a good night's sleep, and you get up and you're ready to do it again. I think the thing that keeps me going and keeps me from getting sidetracked by all of that is that we have a pretty steady stream of people coming in here that want to change their health. And every year, a few people in my contact group change their ways. And one, he promptly ignored it and went on eating, eggs and cheese and ham and all the other garbage that he ate. And I didn't see him for a long time, ran into him and said, where have you been? It's like he fell off the planet. And he told me that he was sort of shutting down his life because he'd had this heart attack and he had his arteries were blocked. And he's telling me all this, how basically at the age of 66, he's just going to stop living. So I listened to the whole thing and I said, would you like to hear an alternative point of view? And he said, yeah. And so he was eating a cheese and ham croissant while we're having this discussion, right? And so I told him, I said, you came to see Forks Over Knives. You know the deal. And it doesn't have to be put down the sandwich and put it over to the side. I said, okay, so what do you want to do? What do you do? At 3 o'clock this afternoon, and we cleaned out his house and we went and got new food. And I hear from him. He travels all over the world, and he'll send me a text message saying, lost 5 pounds, looking great, feeling great, can't believe how easy it is to do. He even was on his boat for like 21 days and managed to stay on the diet while he was on his boat, couldn't believe how easy it was. And so that keeps me going because here's a good friend who probably was on his way to dying and probably only reason to listen to me, right? But you say it and you go, okay, I'm good for the fight for a while longer now.
That's great. That is inspiring. Well, can you say for the audience, Pam, the name of your site, the name of any books? I know you got this Solving America's Healthcare Crisis. Is that published? Is that out?
That's out. My newest book is Food Over Medicine. Ben Bella, the publisher of China Studies, published the website's wellnessforum.com. Lots of information there, and we offer fabulous programs through the Wellness Forum, including an opportunity to earn a degree in nutrition through our school. So hopefully people will visit and get to know us a little bit better.
Well, it's great. You touched on this briefly. You do respect the ethical reasons for living this way. I wonder if you could say a little bit about ethical and perhaps ecological aspects of eating this way.
Well, the ethical issue is that with the way that animals are treated when on conventional farms, it's just horrific. And I would be willing to bet money that if you took 100 of the most carnivorous people that you know and lined them up and said, let's just have one question for you. Do you think it's okay to beat a baby cow in the head with a crowbar? 100% of those people would say no. Okay, well, if you explain to them, look, every time you buy conventionally grown meat, you're supporting that kind of activity. Not all farmers behave that way, but a lot of them do, as you and I both know.
Yeah.
So I think we have an education problem. And I have seen carnivores in my life give up animal foods once they've been exposed to what really goes on. So there's an ethical issue in the way that we're treating animals. It's appalling. And I don't think anybody out there, including the people that unknowingly are supporting this, really thinks this is a good idea. From an ecological standpoint, just looking at the whole thing, global picture, not support the eating plan. We can't support it financially. The people care about this. They just don't put the pieces together the way that they should. And so you start with health because it's more personal and interesting to most people, and then quickly you try to move them to having a little bit bigger understanding of the impact. And the impact that each and every one of us can have is significant. Every time we get somebody to drop out of the current eating system and the current medical system, everything gets better.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Let's see. I think I've covered most of what I wanted to. Is there anything that you'd like to add, or anything that comes into your mind, just for the audience in general, or for people that may be considering a transition like this?
Well, the first thing I would tell people is that this is what we hear from people that we interact with all the time. Two most common comments. The first thing they'll say is the food is a whole lot better than I thought it would be. In fact, it's fabulous. And I have this experience all the time because I bring food to events and, and I always, my line back is, and here all this time you thought I was living on tree bark and pine cones, and really good stuff, isn't it? So that's the first thing. And the second thing is they all say it's not as hard as I thought it was going to be. And that's a function of two things. First of all, lots of tools to teach you how to do it. But the other thing is the world has become a world of healthy eaters. I mean, airplanes will serve good food if you ask. The airports are filled with healthy things to eat. Every restaurant. I mean, I cannot remember the last time I was in a restaurant and couldn't order a dinner that was, and I'm stricter than a lot of people because I don't eat oil and fat and that kind of stuff. And I don't remember the last time I had an experience where there was really nothing. I always eat really well wherever I am. So it is easy. And the freedom that you get from this. And I tell people that, sometimes I think we lecture people like you need to do this for your health. And I think what we need to do is paint a little more positive picture. I'm 57 years old. The last time I made a claim on my health insurance was 1994. The people that I know are spending time in doctor's offices. They take drugs. They feel awful. They're gaining weight. They don't have any energy. They want to sleep all the time. They're scared about their health. I have a friend who just had a radical mastectomy. I don't like that. I like getting up in the morning and feeling great and being able to do the things that any 20-year-old can do and looking forward to living this way until I'm 90. I have an 83-year-old dad who weighs in college, lifts weights every day, rides his bike in physical shape. Okay, so if you think about growing old this way, this is stuff to look forward to. It's not all about, my gosh, you better do this or you're not a good person. It's about, look what you can have if you will adopt this lifestyle. It's just phenomenal, and the rewards are endless. And I just everybody to try it. Here's what I tell people who are hesitant.
Let me have you restate that last point that you made, Dr. Popper, because it got cut. Just restate that, what you tell folks.
Okay. Here's what I tell people who are a little bit hesitant, all right? They're a little shy about trying the diet. I tell them, listen, if you do it my way and you really miss being diabetic, you really miss that extra 50 pounds that you were taking, you can eat your way right back in. It won't take you long at all. But why don't you just try it my way and see what this feels like for a while, and then you can make that decision. You can always go back.
Yeah. Hey, Dr. Popper, I want to thank you for all the work you're doing. It's really inspiring. It's just fantastic. It makes it keeps some hope on the horizon there. So thanks for everything.
Thank you so much. And you're a great interviewer. I enjoyed this a lot.
Well, thank you. And it's unfortunately our quality is not that great, but I'll put some notes in here, and we'll try and get it as good as we can. I'll send you a link when it's complete, and you can review it and have me adjust it in any way you like. And thanks for putting time in your schedule. I'm sure you're really busy, so thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
Bye.